Imagine being one of four siblings, inseparable since birth, fleeing a wildfire together, only to vanish completely in the smoke. 6 years later, a drone surveying burned forest spots something that shouldn't exist. A massive underground bunker, sealed from the outside, containing four bodies positioned as if they'd been working. This is the story of the Chen quadruplets, Mia, Sophia, Lucas, and David, and how a weekend trip to their family's mountain cabin became a nightmare that would haunt investigators for years. What authorities discovered in that bunker defied every logical explanation. The truth was more terrifying than the fire itself. On November 7, 2018, at 6:42 in the morning, 28-year-old Mia Chen sent a group text to her parents in San Jose. The message was cheerful, accompanied by a photo of four smiling faces crowded into the frame. "Heading to the cabin, back Sunday night. Love you." The Chen quadruplets were as close as four siblings could be. Born minutes apart on a spring morning in 1990, they'd grown up finishing each other's sentences, sharing an uncanny intuition about one another, and planning their lives to stay connected. Now, at 28, they were all established professionals living in the San Francisco Bay Area. Mia was a software engineer at a tech startup. Sophia worked as a high school biology teacher. Lucas was an architect with a growing portfolio. David managed operations for a renewable energy company. Despite their busy lives, they made it a tradition to visit their family's cabin in Butte County at least once a season. The small A-frame structure sat on 5 acres of pine forest near Paradise, California, a quiet mountain community about 90 miles north of Sacramento. Their parents had bought the property 20 years earlier, and the quadruplets had spent countless weekends there, hiking, reading, and disconnecting from city life. That Thursday morning, they'd loaded into David's silver Toyota 4Runner with supplies for 3 days. At a Chevron station in Chico, security cameras captured them at 8:15 a.m. purchasing firewood, bottled water, bags of chips, and coffee. The clerk later recalled them laughing about who would cook dinner that night. They seemed relaxed, happy, completely unsuspecting of what was coming. The weather that week had been unusually dry. Humidity sat below 15%, and the Diablo winds, hot, dry gusts that sweep down from the Sierra Nevada, were forecast to reach 50 miles per hour. A red flag warning blanketed Northern California. Fire danger was extreme. At 9:47 a.m., the quadruplets sent their last communication, a photo of the cabin with the caption, "Made it. Perfect weather for a fire in the fireplace." The irony of those words would haunt their family forever. What none of them knew was that at 6:29 that morning, about 12 miles northeast of Paradise, sparks from a faulty transmission line had ignited dry brush on the steep canyon slopes. Within minutes, the fire was racing downhill, pushed by those relentless winds. By 7 a.m., it had consumed 1,000 acres. By 9 a.m., it was advancing toward Paradise at a terrifying pace. The campfire, as it would come to be called, would become California's deadliest and most destructive wildfire in recorded history. Before it was fully contained 3 weeks later, it would burn 153,236 acres, destroy 18,104 structures, and claim 85 lives. But on that Thursday morning, the Chen quadruplets were unaware they were about to be caught in its path. At 10:22 a.m., CAL FIRE issued an evacuation warning for parts of Butte County, including the area where the Chen cabin sat. The family's cabin had no landline, and cell service was spotty. The notification likely never reached them. By 11:15 a.m., the sky above Paradise had turned an apocalyptic orange-black. Ash began falling like snow. Smoke billowed in massive plumes visible from Sacramento. The fire was now consuming a football field of land every second. At 11:37 a.m., the evacuation warning escalated to a mandatory order. Paradise, a town of 26,000 people, began the largest civilian evacuation in California history. 4 main roads led out of town, and within minutes, All of them were clogged with vehicles. Panicked residents grabbed what they could and fled. The smoke was so thick that visibility dropped to less than 20 feet. Day became night. Witnesses later reported seeing the Chen's silver 4Runner on Skyway Road, one of the main evacuation routes, around noon. A woman in the car behind them told investigators she remembered seeing 4 people in the vehicle moving slowly in the gridlock. Then, the smoke thickened, and she lost sight of them. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Chen quadruplets. When Mia, Sophia, Lucas, and David didn't return Sunday night as promised, their parents initially assumed they'd been delayed by road closures. News footage showed Paradise completely engulfed, evacuation centers overflowing, residents trapped and rescued by firefighters. Perhaps the quadruplets were at a shelter, unable to charge their phones. But when Monday morning came and there was still no word, their father, James Chen, called the Butte County Sheriff's Office. The dispatcher took the report, adding it to a list that already contained hundreds of missing person cases from the fire. The active search began on November 13, 2018, once the immediate fire threat had passed. Fire Captain Robert Yamamoto led a team of 12 searchers, including search and rescue dogs, into the burn zone where the Chen cabin had stood. What they found was devastating. The cabin was gone. Nothing remained but the stone chimney and a scorched concrete foundation. The heat had been so intense that metal tools in the shed had melted into puddles. Pine trees stood as black skeletons against the gray ash. David's 4Runner was found approximately 800 yards from the cabin site, abandoned on a Forest Service road. The vehicle was burned but structurally intact. The doors were unlocked. Inside, investigators found Mia's purse containing her wallet, ID, and phone. Sophia's laptop bag sat in the back seat. Lucas's backpack with his camera was in the cargo area. Their belongings suggested they'd left in a hurry but expected to return. The gas tank was nearly full. There were no signs of mechanical failure, no accident damage. The vehicle had simply been left there, as if they'd stepped out and never come back. Search dogs were brought to the vehicle. The German Shepherd named Atlas picked up a scent trail leading northeast from the car, deeper into the forest, away from evacuation routes. The team followed for approximately half a mile before the trail vanished at a rocky outcrop. The dogs circled, whined, and sat down, their signal for a dead end. It was as if they just evaporated, Captain Yamamoto later testified. The dogs had a clear trail, and then nothing. In my 22 years doing this work, I'd never seen that happen. Over the next 10 days, the search expanded to cover a 3-mile radius. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras flew grids over the burn zone. Volunteer groups from surrounding counties joined the effort. Every accessible area was checked. Searchers called out the quadruplets' names until their voices gave out. But the campfire had created a moonscape. Ash lay 3 inches deep in places. The intense heat had incinerated organic material down to mineral soil. If bodies were in the burn zone, they could have been reduced to fragments indistinguishable from other debris. The first theory was the most heartbreaking. They'd died in the fire. Perhaps they'd tried to outrun the flames on foot when traffic stalled. Maybe they'd sought shelter in the wrong place. Hundreds had died that way, overcome by smoke, trapped by flames moving faster than any human could run. But this theory had problems. No remains were found anywhere near their car or cabin site. Cadaver dogs, specifically trained to detect human decomposition even after cremation, found nothing. Forensic teams sifted through ash in a systematic grid pattern. Nothing. The second theory emerged from their families' insistence that the quadruplets were too prepared to simply abandon their vehicle without reason. James Chen told investigators his children had taken wilderness survival courses together as teenagers. They always traveled with emergency kits. They were cautious, not reckless. If they left the car, there was a reason, he said, and they would have stayed together. This led to the third theory. They'd been injured or become disoriented. Perhaps carbon monoxide from the fire had impaired their judgment. They might have wandered away from the vehicle and collapsed somewhere the searchers hadn't reached yet. But where? The search area was expanded to 7 miles. Drone teams photographed every ravine and gully. Nothing. The fourth theory was the hardest for the family to hear. Voluntary disappearance. Could all 4 have planned to vanish? Start new lives somewhere? But investigators quickly dismissed this. Their bank accounts hadn't been touched. Credit cards showed no activity. Social media went silent. Their apartments in San Jose remained exactly as they'd left them, rent automatically deducting each month from savings accounts that would eventually run dry. These were people with careers, friends, lives they loved, said Detective Sarah Morales of the Butte County Sheriff's Office. There was no indication whatsoever that they wanted to disappear. By December 2018, the campfire was 100% contained. The death toll stood at 85. The Chen quadruplets were added to the list of presumed casualties. Without remains, there could be no death certificates, no funerals, only memorial services with empty photo displays. The official report, filed on January 15, 2019, concluded, based on the totality of the circumstances, it is believed that Mia, Sophia, Lucas, and David Chen perished in the campfire of November 2018. Despite extensive search efforts, remains were not recovered due to the extreme temperatures and complete destruction of the area. The case is classified as closed pending discovery of new evidence. For the Chen family, this was unacceptable. They hired private investigators. They created a Facebook page that attracted thousands of followers. They offered a $50,000 reward for information. They returned to the burn zone themselves, walking the same ground the search teams had covered. But as months turned into years, even their hope began to erode. The world moved on. Paradise slowly began to rebuild. Other fires came and went. The Chen quadruplets became another tragic footnote to California's deadliest wildfire. 6 years would pass before anyone learned the truth. In September 2024, the landscape around Paradise had transformed. Where there had once been charred wasteland, new growth was emerging: manzanita bushes, young pines, wildflowers. Cal Fire had implemented a massive fuel reduction program, thinning forests and creating defensible spaces to prevent future catastrophes. Part of this work involved detailed aerial surveys using high-resolution drones equipped with LiDAR technology, which could map terrain beneath tree canopy and detect structures that might pose fire hazards. On September 17, 2024, at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon, drone operator Marcus Webb was flying a grid pattern over a section of national forest land about 2 miles northeast of where the Chen cabin had stood. His job was monotonous: watch the screen, flag anything unusual, move to the next grid square. Marcus, a 34-year-old contractor from Chico, had been doing this work for 3 months. He'd found plenty of things: abandoned vehicles, illegal dump sites, old mining equipment, even a few forgotten homesteads from the gold rush era. He documented each finding and moved on. But at 2:47 p.m., something on his monitor made him stop the drone mid-flight. There was this depression in the ground, he later told investigators. The LiDAR was showing a rectangular outline, really precise, about 40 by 60 feet, and one corner of it had what looked like a vent pipe sticking up through the undergrowth. At first, Marcus thought it might be an old mine adit. The area had been heavily mined in the 1800s, but the shape was too regular, too modern. He lowered the drone to 30 feet and switched to the high-resolution camera. The image that appeared on his screen was strange. Amid the new vegetation, there was a flat area of disturbed earth. In one corner, partially hidden by manzanita, was definitely a vent pipe. New, galvanized steel, not rusted. And there, nearly invisible until he zoomed in, was what looked like a hatch or door, camouflaged with dirt and branches. My first thought was, maybe it's a bunker, Marcus said. somebody's prepper hideout. But the location was weird. Middle of national forest, miles from any road. And why would it be here, right in the burn zone? Protocol required him to report any structures found on public land. He took screenshots, marked the GPS coordinates, and called his supervisor. By 4:15 p.m., a Cal Fire inspector named Rachel Ortiz was driving up the old Forest Service road to investigate. Reaching the site required a quarter-mile hike through dense brush. Rachel brought a county fire marshal with her. They followed Marcus's GPS coordinates to a small clearing in a draw between two ridges. The camouflage was sophisticated. Someone had carefully arranged branches and spread dirt to make the hatch blend with the surrounding terrain. But once you knew what to look for, it was obvious. A steel door, roughly 4 feet square, set into a concrete frame flush with the ground. Rachel tried the handle. It didn't budge. She knelt down and noticed something that made her stomach drop. The hatch was secured from the outside with a heavy padlock, its shank welded to a steel hasp. Why would a shelter be locked from the outside? She radioed back to dispatch. The fire marshal suggested it might be an old government facility, sealed off and forgotten. But the materials were too new. This wasn't decades old. This was recent construction. They decided to call law enforcement. By 6:00 p.m., 2 Butte County Sheriff's deputies arrived. By 6:30 p.m., Detective Sarah Morales, who'd worked the Chen case 6 years earlier, was on scene. Detective Morales made the call to cut the padlock. A deputy used bolt cutters. The lock snapped. The fire marshal grabbed the handle and pulled. The hatch lifted with a grinding sound, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. A blast of stale, cool air rushed up, air that hadn't moved in years. Morales shined her flashlight down. The ladder was metal, bolted to a concrete shaft. It descended about 15 feet to what looked like a floor. She called down. No response. Just silence. "Sheriff's Department," she called again. Nothing. The decision was made to enter. Detective Morales climbed down first, followed by a deputy and the fire marshal. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a large underground room with concrete walls and a low ceiling supported by steel beams. And then they saw them. 4 bodies, seated on the floor in the far corner of the room. They were positioned as if they'd been working. 2 holding what looked like tools, one with hands on a bucket, one slumped against the wall. Their clothing, while deteriorated, was still recognizable. They'd been dead for a very long time. Detective Morales felt her chest tighten. She moved closer, her light sweeping over the scene. On the floor next to one of the bodies was a backpack. She recognized the logo, a local hiking brand. And there, barely visible on the strap, were the initials LC, Lucas Chen. "Oh my God," she whispered. The call went out at 7:02 p.m. 4 bodies found in underground bunker, possible match to 2018 missing persons case. Within an hour, the scene was flooded with investigators, forensic teams, and FBI agents. Lights were set up. The bunker was photographed from every angle. The evidence was overwhelming. This was the Chen quadruplets. But how they'd ended up here, and what had happened to them, would prove to be even more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The bunker itself was approximately 40 by 60 feet, with 8-foot ceilings. Forensic teams determined it had been constructed years before the fire, possibly as early as 2015. The concrete walls were reinforced, the ventilation system sophisticated. This wasn't amateur work. Someone with construction knowledge and significant resources had built it, but it was clearly unfinished. One wall had exposed rebar. A pile of lumber sat in a corner. Bags of concrete mix were stacked near what would have been a second room, and scattered throughout were tools, shovels, wheelbarrows, hammers, welding equipment. Dr. Richard Foster, the county medical examiner, conducted the autopsies over 3 days. His findings were disturbing. All 4 Chen siblings had died of dehydration and starvation. The process had taken approximately 2 to 3 weeks. Their remains showed no signs of violence, no bullet wounds, no blunt force trauma, no evidence of stabbing. but each of them had injuries to their hands consistent with attempting to dig or break through concrete. Their fingernails had been torn. David Chen's hands showed evidence of using tools to chip at the walls. They tried to get out, Dr. Foster testified later. They tried desperately. The timeline reconstruction painted a horrifying picture. The quadruplets had likely been alive in that bunker for weeks after the fire passed. Empty water containers were found, along with protein bar wrappers, supplies that had run out long before help arrived. Most disturbing was a journal found in Sophia's backpack. The Sioux entries, written in increasingly shaky handwriting, detailed their ordeal. Day 3. Still no one has come. David thinks he can break through the north wall. We're rationing water. The man said he'd be back. He lied. Day 7. Lucas is getting weak. We're down to 3 water bottles. We tried screaming again today. Nothing. The man locked us in here to die. Day 12. David broke 2 fingers trying to dig. No water left. We decided to stop writing and save energy. If someone finds this, our parents' number is... The entry stopped mid-sentence. Investigators also found a cell phone, Mia's. She'd apparently tried to document their situation. The last photo, dated November 24, 2018, 17 days after they disappeared, showed all 4 of them, gaunt and dirty, sitting against the wall. No one was smiling. But the bunker itself presented the biggest question. Who had built it, and why were the Chen quadruplets inside? Property records showed the land was part of the Plumas National Forest, federal property. Building any structure here was illegal without permits, and no permits had ever been issued. Someone had constructed this bunker in secret. The investigation expanded. Who had the skills and resources? Who had been in the area before and during the fire? Who had a motive to imprison 4 people in an underground bunker? Detective Morales assigned a team to review every detail of the campfire evacuation. They interviewed witnesses again, reviewed traffic camera footage, checked credit card records for purchases of construction materials in the years before 2018. And slowly, a name emerged. A tip came from a retired forest ranger named Tom McKenzie. He called the sheriff's office on September 22nd, 4 days after the discovery. I don't know if this matters, he said, but there was a guy I caught out there in 2016 building something, said it was just a root cellar for his off-grid place. I told him he couldn't build on federal land. He got angry, said he had a right to prepare, that the government was lying about fire risks, and I filed a report, but I don't think anything came of it. Detective Morales pulled the report. The man's name was Dale Richter, 58 years old, a former construction foreman who lived alone on a small property at the edge of the national forest since 2012. He'd been cited multiple times for various violations: unpermitted structures, water diversion, road damage from heavy equipment. A background check revealed more. Richter had been discharged from the Army Corps of Engineers in 1995 for insubordination. He'd bounced between construction jobs before buying his property with an inheritance. Neighbors described him as paranoid, unfriendly, obsessed with survivalism and government conspiracies. A search warrant was obtained for Richter's property. What they found there confirmed their worst suspicions. On September 25, 2024, at 6 a.m., FBI agents and Butte County Sheriff's deputies surrounded Dale, Richter's 5-acre property. The compound sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by chain-link fence with no trespassing signs every few feet. Richter's home was a modified shipping container, partially underground, with solar panels and a wind turbine. Next to it was a workshop filled with welding equipment, power tools, and construction supplies. 3 storage containers held freeze-dried food, water barrels, ammunition, and medical supplies. Enough for years of isolation. Richter himself emerged from the container when agents announced their presence. He was calm, hands raised, no resistance. He'd been expecting this. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually," he said. Inside Richter's container home, investigators found evidence that painted a damning picture. On a makeshift desk was a binder labeled Project Liberation, his term for the bunker. It contained detailed blueprints, supply lists, construction timelines. The bunker had been his obsession for 3 years before the fire, but more disturbing were the notes dated November 2018. Richter had documented finding the Chen quadruplets. According to his own writings, on November 8, 2018, the day after the fire began, Richter had been at his bunker checking on its integrity when he encountered the quadruplets stumbling through the smoke. They'd abandoned their vehicle when traffic stalled and were hiking toward what they thought was a fire road. Richter wrote, 4 of them, young, healthy, capable. They found the entrance. I couldn't let them report it. The bunker took everything I had. I told them it was a shelter. They went inside willingly. I locked them in. They'll serve a purpose. Test the life support, prove the design works. If they're strong enough, they'll survive. If not, natural selection. He'd left them with 1 day's worth of water and some food. He'd planned to check on them after a week, perhaps let them out if they'd proven worthy. But the fire had been worse than anyone predicted. Richter's own property was threatened. He evacuated to Reno for 2 weeks. By the time he returned, he knew it was too late. His notes from December 2018 were clinical. Checked the bunker today. No sounds from inside. Sealed it permanently. Nature made its choice. He'd welded the hatch shut from the inside using a ventilation access point, then crawled out through one of the air shafts, which he sealed with concrete. The bunker became their tomb. During his interrogation, Richter showed no remorse. They were trespassing on my project, he said matter-of-factly. I gave them a chance to prove they were prepared. They failed. That's not my fault. The fire was coming anyway. I probably saved them from burning. Forensic psychiatrist Dr. Ellen Kwan evaluated Richter over 3 days. Her report concluded he was competent to stand trial, but exhibited severe paranoid personality disorder and narcissistic traits. He believed deeply that society was on the verge of collapse, and that only the prepared deserved to survive. He constructed an elaborate worldview where he was the hero, Dr. Kwan testified. The quadruplets weren't people to him. They were test subjects, obstacles, or at best, potential recruits to his vision. He rationalized their deaths as necessary, even educational. But he understood his actions were criminal. He simply didn't care. Additional evidence found at Richter's property included photographs of the bunker construction, showing it was built over 18 months starting in 2015, a diary dating back to 2012, filled with apocalyptic predictions and rants about weak people. Traffic camera stills of Richter's truck on Skyway Road during the evacuation. He'd been in the area when the Chens went missing. Receipts for the padlock that secured the bunker hatch, purchased November 15, 2018. Cell phone data placing him at the bunker on November 8th and again on December 3rd. Dale Richter was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and multiple federal charges related to building on protected land. His trial began in March 2025. The trial of Dale Richter took place in the Butte County Superior Court in Oroville, California. It lasted 7 weeks. Media coverage was intense. The case had captured national attention as a symbol of how extreme paranoia and survivalist ideology could turn deadly. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Amanda Reeves, presented overwhelming evidence. The jury saw photos of the bunker, heard testimony from forensic experts, and reviewed Richter's own writings. The centerpiece was Sophia Chen's journal, read aloud in court. When Sophia's final entries were presented, her desperate words about water running out, about her brother's broken fingers, about the certainty that they were going to die, several jurors wept openly. The Chen family sat in the front row, stoic but devastated. The defense attorney, Marcus Wright, attempted to argue that Richter hadn't intended to kill the quadruplets. He'd simply imprisoned them temporarily, and circumstances beyond his control, the severity of the fire, the evacuation, had prevented him from returning in time. This wasn't murder, the defense claimed, but negligent homicide at worst. Dr. Kwan's psychiatric evaluation was challenged. The defense presented their own expert, who testified that Richter's paranoid disorder meant he couldn't fully appreciate the consequences of his actions. But the prosecution's rebuttal was devastating. They showed that Richter had made a calculated choice to return to the bunker in December, when the quadruplets were already dead, and seal it permanently rather than report what had happened. He'd covered up the crime for 6 years. That showed consciousness of guilt and deliberate intent. D.A. Reeves told the jury, "Dale Richter is not a survivalist who made a tragic mistake. He is a man who valued his bunker more than 4 human lives. When Mia, Sophia, Lucas, and David found his illegal structure, he saw them as problems to eliminate. He locked them in an underground tomb and left them to die of thirst. Then, he covered it up for 6 years while their family suffered, not knowing if they were alive or dead. That is first-degree murder. 4 times over." On April 19, 2025, after deliberating for 3 days, the jury returned their verdict, guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Dale Richter showed no emotion. He sat motionless, staring straight ahead as if the proceedings didn't concern him. James Chen, the quadruplets' father, was allowed to deliver a victim impact statement before sentencing. "My children were brilliant, kind, and loving," he said, his voice breaking. "They had their whole lives ahead of them. Mia was about to launch her own company. Sophia had just been named Teacher of the Year. Lucas was designing his first major building. David was working on solar projects that could have helped thousands of people. This man took all of that away because he was more concerned about a hole in the ground than about human life. He let them die in darkness, in terror, without even the dignity of telling anyone where they were. I hope he lives a long life in prison, thinking every day about what he did." On May 3, 2025, Judge Patricia Hernandez delivered the sentence. 4 consecutive life terms, without the possibility of parole, plus 40 years for the kidnapping charges. "Mr. Richter," Judge Hernandez said, "you have been convicted of one of the most heinous acts this county has seen. You imprisoned 4 innocent people and left them to die slowly in your underground bunker. Your complete lack of remorse, your twisted justifications, and your attempt to cover up this crime for 6 years demonstrate that you are a danger to society. You will spend the rest of your life in prison, where you will have plenty of time to contemplate the value of the lives you destroyed." Dale Richter was led away without comment. He never apologized, never acknowledged the Chens, never showed any hint of humanity. The bunker where the Chen quadruplets died has been permanently sealed. Federal authorities filled it with concrete in June 2025, ensuring that no one would ever enter it again. The site has been left unmarked, known only by GPS coordinates in official records. But a mile away, at a scenic overlook where the family cabin once stood, a different kind of memorial has been created. 4 young pine trees were planted in a square pattern, one for each of the quadruplets. At their center is a stone marker bearing their names, dates, and a simple inscription chosen by their parents: "Together, always, forever loved." The Chen family established the Quadruplets Memorial Fund, which provides college scholarships for students interested in emergency management and disaster response. They hope that better systems, better training, and better coordination might prevent future tragedies. Paradise continues to rebuild. As of 2025, about 40% of the town's pre-fire population has returned. New homes rise where others burned. The community has become a symbol of resilience, though the scars of the campfire will never fully fade. For the Chen family, the discovery of their children's bodies brought the answers they desperately sought for 6 years. But those answers offered no comfort. "We know what happened now," their mother Susan Chen said in an interview. "But knowing doesn't make it hurt less. We were hoping for 6 years that maybe they were out there somewhere, that maybe they'd survived. The truth is, somehow worse. To know they were alive for weeks, so close, trying to escape, and no one knew. That's unbearable." The bunker's location, less than 3 miles from the initial search area, has prompted changes in search protocols. The Butte County Sheriff's Office now includes ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR surveys in searches for missing persons in remote areas. The technology that found the quadruplets might prevent others from remaining hidden. Dale Richter remains in Pelican Bay State Prison, serving his sentence in administrative segregation. He has given no interviews, filed no appeals, and according to prison records, receives no visitors. His property was seized by the federal government, and the illegal structures he built were demolished in 2025. The story of the Chen quadruplets has become a cautionary tale, not just about the dangers of wildfires, but about what happens when paranoia, isolation, and obsession strip away human empathy. Dale Richter's bunker was meant to be a refuge from disaster. Instead, it became the instrument of one. On clear autumn mornings, when the light filters through the pine trees at the memorial site, visitors sometimes report feeling an unusual peace. The forest has grown back, birds sing, life continues. Nature has moved on, indifferent to the tragedy that unfolded beneath its surface. But for those who knew Mia, Sophia, Lucas, and David Chen, the loss remains raw. 4 bright lights extinguished in darkness, their potential unfulfilled, their voices silenced by one man's twisted worldview. The memorial stone stands as a reminder that even in chaos, even in disaster, evil can find opportunity. And sometimes, the most dangerous predators aren't the flames themselves, but the people who see catastrophe as an excuse to abandon their humanity. The campfire burned 136 acres, but the cruelest destruction happened in a space no larger than a living room, where 4 siblings spent their final days together, not consumed by fire, but by the calculated indifference of a man who valued concrete and steel more than human life.